if you take a microscope to a pointillism painting, the actual masterpiece just completely vanishes. You're basically left staring at this meaningless geography of isolated dots,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. A blue smear here, maybe a yellow drop there, but no real picture.
Right. There's absolutely zero context. You have no way to derive the actual image from just staring at those dots.
Because the viewer lacks the necessary dimensional perspective to see the emergent pattern. And historically, that is precisely how human systems have had to process massive, complex data sets.
We just stare at the isolated dots.
Right. A single patient symptom, a single financial transaction, because the human brain simply does not have the processing architecture to step back and, perceive the entire multidimensional canvas all at once.
We get completely lost in the noise.
Yeah.
But that is rapidly changing, and that is exactly what we are getting into today. So welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Whether you are, actively building these systems or maybe trying to catch up on the absolute bleeding edge of tech trends, or you're just naturally curious about the hidden forces steering our future, our mission today is for you.
Yeah, we're really getting into the weeds today on how all this connects.
We really are. We're going to explore how artificial intelligence is simultaneously becoming hyper-personalized down to the microscopic details of your daily life,
Yeah.
while actively forcing this massive, unifying global architecture.
It's wild, right? The convergence of those two extremes is really the defining dynamic of this exact moment.
It's everywhere.
We are analyzing a technological framework that can map the latent spaces in a single strand of your DNA and then, simultaneously use that exact same mathematical architecture to rewrite how sovereign nations share global infrastructure.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
Right.
So to map this out, we are diving into a comprehensive AI news digest. This one is dated April 29th, 2026.
A very revealing snapshot of where things stand.
Definitely. And our roadmap today covers 3 distinct domains. We're looking at healthcare, finance, and international relations.
Which on the surface seem completely siloed. Like, what does a hospital have to do with a bank or a geopolitical treaty?
Right. But we are going to uncover a shared underlying computational pattern that is just fundamentally reshaping society across all of them. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the healthcare sector, where the sheer volume of data has historically been, well, a massive bottleneck.
Huge. The shift detailed in this digest marks the transition from heuristic, probabilistic medicine to deterministic, hyper-personalized medicine.
Which is a big jump.
It's massive. For a century, human doctors have operated on heuristics. They memorize symptom clusters.
Right, like if you have a fever and a cough, it's probably the flu.
Exactly. But when it comes to rare diseases, those heuristics totally fail. A physician has a biological limit to how many clinical anomalies they can hold in their active memory.
Right, they're only human. They are forced to look for the most statistically common explanation for a symptom. They see the blue dot of, chronic fatigue, and they try to match it to the few other blue dots they've treated in their specific career.
Yeah, and that's where the blind spots happen. But the 2026 Digest highlights diagnostic AI systems that are doing something entirely different. They aren't just, reading medical journals faster than a human. They are utilizing multi-dimensional vector spaces.
Okay, wait. Multi-dimensional vector spaces. Break that down for us. What does that actually mean computationally?
Yeah, it sounds like sci-fi, but basically these AI models take a patient's multi-omics profile.
Which means?
Meaning their genomic sequence, their transcriptomics, their metabolic data, and they combine all of that with real-time continuous biometric data from wearables.
Oh, wow. So it's a ton of constant data.
Exactly. And then the system plots those billions of data points into a space with literally thousands of dimensions. It is looking for mathematical correlations between, say, a specific protein misfolding and a systemic symptom that a human brain literally cannot visualize.
Because we just can't see in thousands of dimensions.
Yeah.
It maps the mathematical distance between these obscure variable.
Right. So when a patient presents with an obscure, seemingly disconnected set of symptoms, the AI instantly finds the latent relationships.
It's like a brilliant sleepless medical detective who just instantly cross-references your genetics with, well, with every medical journal ever written.
Yeah, and the digest notes, this is drastically reducing diagnosis times for overlooked rare conditions. Patients who used to go on these agonizing years-long diagnostic odysseys.
Bouncing from specialist to specialist.
Exactly. Now they're getting accurate root cause identifications in a fraction of a second. What's fascinating here is how this entirely upends the economics and resource allocation of modern healthcare.
Because it's no longer just guessing and checking.
Right. The old one-size-fits-all approach wasn't just medically inefficient, it was financially catastrophic.
I can imagine.
Think about administering a costly, brutal chemotherapy regimen for 6 months, only to discover the patient's genetic profile made them resistant to that specific compound from day one. That is a massive drain on the system.
And obviously terrible for the patient. But by simulating the treatment efficacy mathematically beforehand, hospitals are drastically reducing resource strain. It shifts the whole paradigm from trial and error to precision targeting.
Precisely.
But, I want to push back on the frictionless optimism of this, though. Because if an AI model is consistently generating a, say, 99.9% probability score for a highly complex genetic diagnosis, we inevitably run headfirst into automation complacency.
Yeah, that's a very real concern.
Right. Does relying on these machine learning models for life or death genetic diagnoses risk making hospitals too dependent on the technology? Like potentially losing the human intuition of a seasoned doctor. Not just their bedside manner, but their ability to synthesize unstructured, undigitized context.
Well, context collapse is the primary vulnerability of these systems. The AI only knows what has been parameterized and fed into its model.
Exactly.
It might perfectly analyze a genomic sequence, but it doesn't know that the patient's water supply was recently contaminated or that they are living in a high-stress, abusive household. Not unless someone explicitly encoded that environmental data into the system.
Because the mathematical model assumes the data it has is the entire universe of relevant information. The map becomes the territory.
Yes.
If the machine is statistically superior the vast majority of the time, the human physician might just stop aggressively questioning the edge cases where, undigitized human reality is actually the root cause of the illness.
And that's why the medical community is having to entirely redefine the role of the physician. The doctor is no longer the primary calculator of probabilities. They become the auditor of the algorithm's context.
Wow, an auditor of context.
Yeah, they have to actively search for the variables the AI cannot see.
That makes total sense. Now let's take that exact same architectural superpower. The ability of neural networks to find nonlinear correlations in incredibly sparse, noisy data, and look at our second domain. Because the digest shows this identical mechanism is currently ripping through the global financial sector.
It is.
Yeah.
The underlying math translates seamlessly. Whether an algorithm is analyzing a sequence of amino acids to predict a protein fold, or analyzing a sequence of financial transactions to predict consumer behavior, it is fundamentally performing sequence prediction and anomaly detection.
So the digest details how major banks have completely abandoned rule-based fraud detection. They aren't just flagging a credit card because, it was used in Paris instead of Chicago.
Right, which was always super annoying.
So annoying. Instead, they're deploying massive transformer models, similar to the architecture behind large language models, to understand the grammar of a customer's financial life in real time.
Because rule-based systems are inherently reactive. A thief steals a card, breaks a hard-coded rule, the bank freezes the account, and then spends weeks trying to recover the lost funds.
Right, it's always after the fact.
Exactly. Transformer models move the entire industry into a proactive state. The AI calculates the probability of your next transaction based on the entire historical context window of your behavior.
So if a transaction deviates from that multidimensional prediction, even if it's happening in your own zip code, the model blocks it instantly before the ledger even updates.
Yes. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this dual approach of security and accessibility is what builds crucial consumer trust in digital banking.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This hyper-personalization isn't just playing defense like stopping fraud. It's playing offense through the explosion of highly advanced robo-advisors.
Oh, absolutely. This is reshaping everything.
For decades, bespoke, dynamic wealth management was fiercely gatekept. You needed a massive minimum balance just to get a meeting with a human wealth manager who could, continuously adjust your portfolio based on market conditions and your specific tax liabilities. It was a luxury service.
The barrier to entry for capital compounding was artificially high simply because human financial labor is expensive.
Exactly. But the digest outlines how AI is completely democratizing that access. It's like suddenly giving a college student with their first savings account access to a high-end, bespoke Wall Street wealth manager.
It's wild to think about.
The system continuously analyzes their micro-income streams, calculates their exact risk tolerance, and dynamically hedges their portfolio across global asset classes in real time. It fundamentally alters the trajectory of retail investing.
It really empowers an entire demographic that historically allowed their capital to just erode in low-yield savings accounts due to the sheer complexity of market navigation.
But, I have to ask, if AI democratizes finance by giving millions of everyday people the exact same highly sophisticated robo-advisors, does it change the nature of the stock market itself if everyone's algorithm is giving them similar advice? Like, doesn't that introduce a fascinating systemic fragility?
Oh, you are describing the homogenization of alpha.
The homogenization of alpha.
Yeah, and it is a profound structural risk. Markets require a diversity of opinion to provide liquidity.
Right. For every buyer, there needs to be a seller.
Exactly. If 10 million retail robo-advisors simultaneously calculate that a specific bond market is overvalued based on a new inflation metric, and they all execute sell orders in the exact same millisecond, the market loses its equilibrium.
You trigger a cascading flash crash because there are no counterparties left to buy.
Mhm.
Everyone's algorithm reached the exact same smart conclusion simultaneously.
Right. The tool designed to perfectly optimize and protect the individual's wealth inadvertently liquidates the entire system because it destroys the friction that keeps the market stable.
That is terrifying.
Which is why it forces the developers of these financial models to actively engineer artificial variance into their systems.
Wait, they have to build in randomness?
Basically, yeah. They have to ensure that micro-personalizations, like a user's specific timeline for buying a house or their hyper-specific tax bracket, weigh heavily enough in the algorithm to scatter the trading patterns. It prevents the macroeconomic data from forcing all the bots into a synchronized stampede.
Wow. Which brings us perfectly to the final macro-level realization of this digest. Whether an AI is holding your genetic data or your life savings, the stakes are incredibly high. These are not just isolated consumer products. These models form the new foundational infrastructure of modern civilization.
They absolutely do.
And that demands an answer to the most critical question. Who is setting the rules for these life-altering algorithms? Who is actually writing the architecture for these systems?
Well, you are looking at the necessity of planetary scale governance. The sheer velocity of open source AI development simply does not respect geographic borders or traditional regulatory frameworks.
Right? Code doesn't care about borders. And the 2026 Digest highlights a massive leap forward in this exact arena. They detail a newly launched international consortium of tech companies and academic institutions from the US, Europe, and Asia.
This isn't just a political summit, it is a joint technological initiative. Their explicit mandate is to develop unified ethical AI guidelines and engineer structural solutions to AI bias.
Because, the democratization of finance or the hyper-personalization of medicine only works if the underlying AI is unbiased.
Exactly. This raises an important question about how international cooperation is no longer just a political ideal, but a technological necessity to prevent biased data. It is an issue of pure statistical validity.
Right.
If a predictive diagnostic model is trained almost exclusively on the genetic data of populations from North America, its high-dimensional vector space will be entirely warped. It fundamentally cannot accurately predict outcomes for populations in sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia.
The model will confidently output entirely incorrect, potentially lethal treatment plans because its universe of data is just incomplete.
Yeah, and the exact same logic applies to the financial sector. If the historical data used to train a loan approval transformer model contains decades of human bias regarding geography or race, the AI doesn't magically correct the bias.
It perfectly automates and scales that discrimination at the speed of light.
Exactly. So the digest specifically notes they are sharing AI resources, specifically open access datasets and research tools. You cannot train a universally applicable, unbiased AI without a universally diverse dataset. Pooling resources breaks down silos, accelerates innovation, and ensures AI benefits all humanity.
But how do they actually execute that without violating the privacy of billions of people? You can't just email the raw genetic data and financial histories of the European population to servers in Asia or the US, the geopolitical privacy laws make that completely impossible.
Yeah, that would be a nightmare. Instead, they rely on architectures like federated learning and differential privacy.
Federated learning.
Right. Instead of pooling all the world's raw, sensitive data into one massive, vulnerable central server, the AI models are sent directly to the local data silos.
How I say?
The model trains locally at a hospital in Paris or a bank in Tokyo. It learns the underlying patterns, updates its mathematical weights, and then only those updated weights.
The abstract learnings.
Exactly, the abstract learnings, totally stripped of any personal identifiers, those are sent back to the global consortium to update the master model.
So what does this all mean? When you look at the mechanics of federated learning and shared algorithmic weights, it looks a lot less like a traditional political treaty and a lot more like, I don't know, the development of the early internet.
That's a great way to look at it.
It reminds me of the building of the International Space Station.
Yeah.
Or the creation of TCP/IP. We can't have different countries using entirely different incompatible safety standards if we're all trying to navigate the same uncharted territory of ethical AI. The network would fracture.
That is the exact scale of what this consortium is attempting. They are building the fundamental routing protocols for algorithmic decision-making. By establishing shared repositories for model weights and bias testing tools, they are actively forcing competing corporations and rival sovereign nations out of their silos.
Because if one nation unleashes a highly capable open source model that is deeply flawed or misaligned, it doesn't stay confined to that nation.
No, it's downloaded, integrated into global supply chains, and executing code worldwide within hours.
The sheer speed of algorithmic contagion forces collaboration. The digest makes it clear that this pooling of global resources is the only viable method to ensure the technology stabilizes humanity rather than fracturing it.
We are watching the construction of a shared digital nervous system. It requires an entirely new framework of international relations, where shared computational infrastructure supersedes traditional geopolitical boundaries.
It's incredible. Let's pull all of these massive threads together and step back from the canvas for a second. Over the course of this deep dive, we've tracked how artificial intelligence is operating as this profoundly intimate micro-level assistant.
Right.
It is navigating the high-dimensional latent space of your specific DNA to catch a rare disease before it manifests, saving lives. It is mapping the precise sequential rhythm of your financial life to instantly block fraud and compound your wealth. Yet, the exact same mathematical architecture is simultaneously forcing macro-level global integration.
Compelling rival nations to securely share the weights of their neural networks just to keep the planetary system mathematically sound.
Exactly.
And for you listening, whether you are coding these models or just navigating the world they are building, it is crucial to internalize that this digest from April 2026 isn't theoretical. This is the architecture of the immediate future. These hidden computational layers are actively determining the efficacy of how your doctor treats you, how your money grows, and how nations interact.
The dots of the painting are all mathematically linked. Which leaves me with one final thought, something I really want you to mull over after we wrap up today.
Oh, let's hear it.
We just explored how this global consortium is using federated learning to bypass political friction and share insights seamlessly across borders. If AI systems become the ultimate, most frictionless mechanism for breaking down international silos and sharing data, could these decentralized AI networks eventually become the blueprint for how human governments themselves should cooperate?
Wow. Replacing the slow, ideological gridlock of traditional diplomacy with the rapid, objective optimization of the algorithm?
Exactly. But if we optimize away all the friction, do we also optimize away the essential, slow deliberation of democracy? Or will the sheer velocity of open-source AI innovation ultimately outpace our human ability to govern it collectively, forcing us to let the machines manage the complexity we created?
We are definitely testing the absolute limits of human systemic management.
We really are. Sometimes you have to force yourself to step back from the chaotic, isolated data points of the daily news cycle to actually perceive the massive multidimensional masterpiece that is rendering right in front of us. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the patterns,